So this is the 2020 version of the Stroll Through History. My group, Woodland Parlor 30, which is part of the Native Sons of the Golden West, decided to just move forward and get people out and about and try to resume normal activities as best we can. So normally what would happen is on Stroll Day, I'd give a Dead Cat Alley tour, and we'd start down at the plaza and we'd work around, and I'd tell some history of all the buildings and the people in the alley, and then we'd stop here, and then Jack Dinn, the star of today, would he'll talk a lot about this building, which is where his family grew up and had the Tylee laundry. But anyway, back to the usual tour. We would come here and stop. Jack would tell his stories, and that would be the featured attraction on the tour. Then after Jack was done, I would take the tour and go that way, but since I'm the boring part of the tour, usually people would just peel out after Jack was done. So we're just going to do one stop here, but there are different things going on today that we're presenting. So down the next block, the Roth building, which is the old Sears store building, that's going to be open between 10 and noon. So if you wanted, there's some displays set up in there. There's a display on Jack's family, and as well as Chinatown. And I see Kathy Harriman's here. She's going to be down there and talk about Chinatown, which is very interesting. So in the back, what we call the Roth warehouses, we'll have the big sliding doors open, and it'll be open air, and people can come in and out. And there are some snacks over there too for after this. Woodland Gold and Silver will have a continuous slide show going on of old postcards of the downtown. Brandon will be open from 10 to 4, so in an hour he'll be open. You could do some shopping there if you want. And then Old Town Hall, which is at 702 Main Street. That's Tom and Meg Stollard's building they purchased. It used to be the Pearson's appliance store. That's going to be open from 10 to 10:30. So it's in the middle of a renovation. So I think it'd be very exciting for you to go and check out the work in progress. So Tom will be over there. And I'm reading off a schedule. And these schedules will be stacked up at the Roth, but my wife Katie is standing back there. She has things if you want them. Not to do it right now, because I know if I was in my classroom and you know how it is. So if she starts passing out paper, then people don't pay attention to the presenter. Okay, so then at 10:30 to 11, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the Porter building. So if you have memories of going to the dentist in the Porter building a long time ago, and you want to see the second and third, remember? Second and third floors, where I'm going to take people up the elevator, or you can go up the stairs, and then we'll just do a walkthrough. I'm not going to get a lot into the history, but just a little bit, and I do have a couple ghost stories to share about the area around there. And then at 11:30 to 12, I'll make a little historic talk. We'll come back right about here, and where it used to be the old Strand Theater is in what used to be the Diamond E building. So I'm going to focus on that part of the history of the building, and then we will walk through that building too. So there's some displays in there as well. So here we are. What you're facing, the site of Henry Wyckoff's old trading post that was built about 1853. That building is no longer there. It was demolished in 1949, but there's a picture of it right here. So as Jack talks, you can kind of visualize how that corner right there looked back when Jack was growing up. So that particular building survived the Great Fire, and I can't remember what year that was. But you'll also notice that plaque that's on the side of it. So getting back to what year was that big fire?
1893, 92.
Okay, so there was a fire that started behind in that area, and fortunately the winds were blowing that way, so most of the block was destroyed in that fire. But what was left was that simple wooden structure that goes back to the beginning of Woodland. So what that plaque back there, what it says, and I'm just going to read it. It says, Woodland begins. On this site in 1853, Henry Wyckoff built the town's first store to serve travelers and farmers. In 1862, the small wooden building owned by Franklin S. Freeman, he's the founder of Woodland, became Yolo's interim courthouse after Woodland became the county seat. The original structure was also home to a church, bakery, saloon, dress shop, and the Din family's Tiley laundry from 1925 to 1947. 4 Din children were born there, including Jack, John. I don't think Hank was. Hank got the privilege of being born in the hospital. Okay, so how did I meet Jack? In 2002, my organization, the Woodland Art Center, adopted the alley to put. We had this great idea if we adopted the alley and put some artwork up and down the alley, which you can see. If you see that cat on top of that building, that was done by Gary Dinnan. So there's 13 cats up and down the alley. Anyway, that's kind of a sidebar, but that's how things got started with my interest in Dead Cat Alley. So the Stroll Through History knew our group was doing this, so David Wilkinson asked if I wouldn't mind doing a tour of Dead Cat Alley, because I guess that had been a tour on Stroll Day. So he gives me this blue binder, which was very informative, a lot on the architecture, but I didn't have much knowledge of the history of, well, even Woodland, let alone Dead Cat Alley. So anyway, we started this tour in 2002, so that's 18 years ago. We've had a pretty good run, huh? So at that time, we met way down by the old electric garage. Isn't that where we were? Somewhere around there. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of people showed up. I was kind of surprised. So I started, actually not surprised, I started getting really nervous because I didn't know anything about the alley really, other than what I had in the binder, and I was going to just read that stuff and then make up some stuff, I guess. But anyway, I noticed Jack, didn't know it was Jack at the time, but he had many family members with him, and so we were doing introductions of the group. And so Jack introduced himself, and then he said, I was born on Dead Cat Alley, and our family laundry was down the street, so I didn't know how to really react. I go, well, there goes my show. But fortunately, it was great because he took a lot of pressure off of me. We ended up right here, which we have done almost every year since 2002. Jack's only missed a few Stroll days. One time he had heart surgery, so that, and then I know he has had some family things to take care of too. Last year you went to see up to Portland for your sister-in-law's 90th birthday. So that's a good excuse. So anyway, so Jack and I have been doing this for 18 years, including Rich Westfall, the main man right here. We've been, yeah, give him a hand. So Rich was he's been the straight guy on the tour. One example is down there was the Air Dome Theater. It was an open air theater. It was across the alley from the Woodland Opera House. And so one of my favorite jokes was it was Woodland's first topless theater. So I got that one in, Jack. So anyway, it's been a good run, and made very good friends with Jack and his family.
We made you a family member.
Yes, well, yes, I'm a paper son. I guess I had gone to enough family gatherings, and so it was Pleasanton or Danville. Where was that? The family reunion. So they surprised me, and Jack adopted me. So
All we did is have to take off his O, so we did.
yeah. So just take the O off of my name. My name's Dino. Oh, all right. Thank you. I'll put that on. I won't do it in front of the crowd, but I will put this on. Yeah. Thank you so much. I knew she was up to something because she asked my shirt size, and I said I'm trying to stay into a large.
And we have one for Rich also.
Thank you so much. Okay, so there's this handy booklet that I use a lot as a guide for me, because I don't remember every detail of the alley. But what I want to do is just read the section on the Din family and Ty Lee Laundry, just to kind of give a little outline to what Jack's going to be talking about. Because first I'm going to introduce Jana, and then she'll talk a little bit about, and then introduce Jack, her dad. And then you could see there's a lot of stuff up here that Jack's going to show and tell. So anyway, from 1925 to 1947, the Din family operated Ty Lee Laundry at this location. Ty Lee means great strength, and is not the name of owner Hugh Din. Din came to San Francisco in 1912. His wife, Lakshi, arrived on a later ship in 1921. After daughter Ruby was born in 1922, the Dins moved to Merced, California, and ran a laundry business. Lucy, Jack, John, and Jimmy Din were born in the original Wyckoff building. So we know what the original Wyckoff building was. In total, there were 8 children of Hugh Din, also known as Bo Gun Gong. Is that right? Okay. And Lakshi Din. George, Frank, and Henry are the other children. Jack Din said, "We just called it the alley. We didn't know it was called Dead Cat Alley. There were no signs. None of the alleys were named at the time. It was just the alley between 1st and 2nd off Main Street. But somewhere along the line, they must have found dead cats. I always found stray cats. So people probably started calling it Dead Cat Alley." So this was something you said a while ago. It's in a book, so it must be true. Across the alley north of the Ty Lee Laundry, the Din family grew their World War II Victory Garden. The laundry's drying yard also occupied the space on that side of the alley. So as Jack's speaking, I might be flipping some posters, and you could see the drying yard and how the clothes were hung and all that good stuff. In 1947, the original Wyckoff small box frame structure was demolished. So here's the date of the fire, July 1892. With north winds blowing, flames broke out in a small barn on Dead Cat Alley in back of Bartoli's grocery store near 1st Street. Peter Calder and Harry Greminger were the first to see the flames. According to the Democrat, they were in a wagon at Dunphy's blacksmith shop, corner of 1st and Dead Cat Alley. They jumped and ran toward the barn, shouting an alarm of fire as they ran. Okay, so there you have a date, 1892, when Dead Cat Alley was named in the newspaper. Wow. It goes back even farther. In 1873, Sam Ruland was reportedly robbed on Dead Cat Alley. So the name Dead Cat Alley has been around for at least early 1870s. Okay. So I guess let's get going with the real show. I'm going to introduce Jana Din, my sister. Oh, hey, Rich, can you hold that up? One more housekeeping thing before we could move on to the main attractions. So I'm giving this poster to Jack. This is something special we did this year, so you might have seen it posted online. And I have, for family members, I have a stack. If you want to go to the Roth building after this, I have a stack of these, and if we run out, then I can have more made. But those are souvenirs for some of Jack's Danny came from a long ways away to join us today, so we're very appreciative of that. Okay, that's good. All right, so without further ado, here's my sister Jana.
Thank you, Dino. Hi, I'm Jack's eldest daughter, and I have two younger sisters. Julie, raise your hand, please. And then there's Andrea, or Andy as she's called. And then she has her two children and husband here. And I'd like to introduce you to the other relatives, too. So, as we were talking about, there's John Den. John, do you want to raise your hand again? I don't know if everybody saw. And what number sibling are you, John? Uncle John?
7.
You're the 7th. He says 6th. As you can see, they don't have a lot of agreement. In one of the newspaper articles that Dino discovered, it said that there were how many siblings? 11. Yeah, and so those are what they called paper sons or paper siblings.
Article mentioned that the father was not too clear on the names or the ages of these people.
So that's kind of a convoluted family history. So there's lots of cousins. Cousins, can you raise your hands? And then there's Uncle Hank, that's another sibling. Raise your hand, Uncle Hank. And his wife Dee. And Adele, their daughter, and their son is in Pennsylvania with his wife and daughter. And let's see, who else do we have here? I'm looking out over the crowd. My husband, John, and daughter, Cheyenne. And so some of the relatives drove in from the Bay Area. And so we just really want to welcome everybody here. We're really honored that you would come out and listen to the family story here, too. Like Dino was saying, it's been many, many years that my dad and he met with Rich and have been forging this beautiful family relationship. And so we actually came up with some certificates of identity for Dino because these were what were required to re-enter the United States if Chinese left the United States, took over. And so here's one for Lee Y. Pac Din O. That's you. One of those nebulous 11 siblings. And then Rich, yours is Yang Din Rich, because they could not pronounce the R, so they exchanged it with an L.
Thank you so much.
So anyway, I really want to just hand it over to my dad right now. And Grant, another cousin, and I have kind of been the family genealogists. I have to tell you really quickly that my dad keeps discovering all of this memorabilia. Just last week, he brought out this metal box, and he said, "Look what I found." And he actually found some high school graduation programs from the siblings Lucy and Ruby back in, what decade was that? The 40s. And so I didn't know that existed. And so I quickly texted Grant and I said, "Look, Grant, we have to hurry up and, scan these before they disappear back into all the stuff at the house." But anyway, Dad, why don't you come on over here? And I don't know if you want me to hold the microphone for you. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm really surprised to see such a group out today, but I'm very pleased. I thought mainly that all my family would just be the people here. But anyway, welcome, and I might get a little long-winded on this, and if you ever get tired, just wave your hand and say goodbye, okay? First, I'm going to ask, how many people were born during the Great Depression? Do we have anybody here? Okay. So I can tell any kind of lies and you really won't know. I wore this hat, which is Korean War, because I was volunteered for the Army in 1952, and that was right in the middle of the Korean War. And that means that what? I had to be about 20 years old at the time, so that makes me how old? Really old. 91 years old this year. So like I say, I'm going to tell a lot of lies, and you weren't born around then, so you won't know the difference. But anyway, I'm very pleased to meet all of you. Anyway, when I was thinking about coming over here, and I said, why would people want to look at a building and not know much about it, and it's not even here anymore? So I said, well, okay. My dad ran a laundry for about 20 years, 1925 to 1947. And we had to close up then because all the boys, there were 6 of us, 4 of us started college that year. But I'll get into that later. But anyway, I had this book called Chinese Laundries. And I said, okay, what tie-in does that have with this building? Well, we had a laundry in the building for 20 years. We lived in it too, so it's not just a place of business. So I'll get into that a little later on. But I was a little concerned about talking about it, but then I found this little blurb in this book. It said, Longbow Gan came in 1912 and had a laundry in Merced, and then he moved to Woodland in 1925. Anyway, the point was, that is the actual name of my father, but he went by Woodland, and that's a long story, but it's because of what we call paper sun. Have any of you heard about paper suns before? Okay, good. The Chinese had a lot of problems, a lot of prejudice, and well, first off, they originally came over during the gold rush, and they worked some of the mines, and then half the time they were either chased out by the white miners, or their claims are stolen or something like that. But they had a lot of trouble anyway. And then after the mines gave out, the gold mines, then they stayed over here and worked on the railroad. So a lot of them were able there. And then you might remember that a group from the west and a group from the east connected the railroads in Inflammatory Point, Utah. Well, although it was the Chinese that really did all the hard work in that on the west part, they were never shown in that picture. It just showed all the white people. I don't mean to cause any or say anything that will that you'll have any affront to, but it's just part of history, and that's what I want to tell you. And that's anyway. In 1893, because of this problem with the Chinese and the whites, they finally got the Exclusion Act. And the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1893 made the possibility of immigrating very difficult. And that's where all this paper son bit came in. In order to come over, you had to be connected with maybe somebody that was here in the United States already, or have a business or something like that. Long story short, a lot of the immigration laws were overcome by the Chinese immigrants by claiming to be a paper son, an actual son of somebody that was already over here, or had some ties in, or even were citizens of the United States already. So that's why we call them paper sons. And the reason why I chose this book here, and that name, Longbow Gan, was my actual father's name, his Chinese name. But he came over as a paper son under false papers. This paper was old learned. And his wife actually was brought over about 10 years later by his brother as his wife. So anyway, long story short again, we're bastard children, because my dad officially was never married to my mother, at least not over here.
Wow.
His wife was actually, he married before he left China when he was just 16, and that was typical what they did. Before they send your son over, they made sure that he had a wife. Okay, so that's why I was a little concerned about that, because I'll tell you what, I don't know where my brothers had any problem, but I volunteered for the Army. Not very smart, I'll tell you that. But anyway, this recruiting sergeant says, why don't you sign up for OCS, Officer Candidate School? And he says, you can, if you ever drop out of that, then you just fulfill your draft obligation of 2 years. Otherwise, if you stay in, then you can become a commissioned officer. So that sounded kind of good to me at the time. I actually was a college graduate at that already, so I said, well, that might help me. Anyway, let's see, where am I at? I stayed in and actually became an officer by going to Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia, which was an infantry school. And after my tour of duty, which was 3 years, I got out. The requirement was that you had to become a member of the reserves after that. You had to have a total of 8.5 years Army, active duty, and reserve. So anyway, so when I came out as a second lieutenant, I said, well, okay, I'll go sign up for the reserves. Okay, I went through all the things there, going to training and study classes and all that, and pretty soon I started to get promoted, and then I became a first John, then a captain, then a major, and then a lieutenant colonel. I said, well, hell, I must stick it out all the way. So after 31 years, I was promoted as a full colonel. So that's why I'm proud to wear this hat, because I was in during the Korean War. I volunteered, which was not too smart at the time, but anyway. And I brought all this out because my brothers are here and they're going to say something nasty. But my brother John, actually, he was a captain because he was drafted out of medical school. I guess he was still having his residency. Anyway, but they drafted him into service, but he went in as a captain. And actually, his tour of duty was at the Sacramento Army Depot as a post surgeon. So what a soft job he had. And then Brother Hank, what, you went in as a draftee or? Okay, he enlisted also, not too smart. But anyway. But anyway, he went into the Navy, went to what, Navy or OTC or OCS, whatever they called that, and he came out as a naval officer. What was your final rank? Lieutenant. Okay, first lieutenant like a captain. So anyway, I said, well, hell, we served our country, and even though our parents came over as what we call paper sons on illegal papers, I said we did our part, and I think we had a right to. Okay, so we did our part, and I was glad to see that the actual thing was written up in the paper in this book as his real name. Grant Den, my nephew. Where are you, Grant? Raise your. He's involved very much in the I don't know, genealogy, but he's the one that I guess provided the information on it. So I said, well, if it's out in the book, then I'm not worried about it. But I will tell you that during this time I was waiting to go into OCS, I had to go through what they call a secret clearance, and this was when I was a private in the training at Fort Ord, California. Every once in a while, they call me up to the office and says, Dan, they can't find anything on your dad, your father. And I give them the information again, and then maybe a couple months later, they call me up again. They said, we can't find anything. Finally, I said, oh, okay. My dad said his papers were all burned up during the 1906 earthquake and fire in San Francisco. Well, that's obviously a lie because he didn't come over until 1912. And I always wondered what my brothers John and my brother Hank, whether they asked you about that. Okay. But anyway, like I say, we all served the country, and I think and even the two brothers, the three older brothers, all were during World War II. One was a tech sergeant in the Air Corps, as it was called at the time. He served in the ground crew, working on aircraft, electrician. What's called. The second one, Frank, was in the Navy, and he actually had a lot of combat because at the end of the war, he said that they were having kamikaze planes dive into their what's called. He said that their ship just missed being hit by a kamikaze plane, and then Brother Jimmy was sent to Yale University. Actually, he was drafted out of high school because of his age. He had turned 18 in his junior year, and so at that time the war was really hot and heavy. So they drafted him before he even got out of high school. And let's see, okay, when he got in, they sent him to Yale University to study Chinese because they knew that they were going to need some interpreters near the end of the war because it was all moving over to the South Pacific or the Pacific side. So anyway, we all served in the service, 6 boys, and I said, I'm proud of it, and I'm not concerned, and I know my parents did a good job of we couldn't even understand them because they spoke Chinese, but somehow, the good parts came out. So that's them. All right. Okay, my daughter says I'm running out of time, so I got to. Let's go. Here's a picture of the family standing over here in the alley. Oh, incidentally, that parking lot used to be the laundry drying yard. It was, on this laundry, they called all the Chinese laundries hand laundries because what they did basically was iron the shirts after they was washed by some commercial laundry. Well, my dad actually, I don't know where he found but he actually had some steam presses, so we did the shirt by steam presses, and then my sister Ruby, which is this one, the oldest one, her job was to touch up the shirts after they were pressed, because pressing them really left a lot of wrinkles and stuff. And let me explain who this. You can't see my father, but he actually has a smile on his face, even though he's got 6 kids here. And you can see they're really right in a row, hardly any more than 9 months apart. So.
Did you want to show this, Dad? Is this from the laundry?
Yeah. Anyway, these are some of the things that we had in the laundry. This was I don't know that any of you want to recognize what this might be. It's a sprinkler. It's a sprinkler, and it was filled with water, and my mom used this mostly because she ironed the sheets. She ironed the sheets on mangoes. All the sheets were ironed. Well, they had to keep them wet, so they used it there. This is a little blower. I guess, some of you must recognize this. It was filled with water, and then we blew and wet the clothes as we ironed it. Unfortunately, I won't say unfortunately, but my 3 brothers during the war all were in the service. And unfortunately for me, I was the one left there, and my 2 brothers are too young, but I was the one that had to do all the pants. I had all the pants, the underwear, long johns, and things like that. And I'll tell you, I didn't really enjoy that job. You see this iron? Remember, we started in the 1920s, and at the time, all we had for electricity was one long cord with a light on the end of the cord. But how did we heat the irons? There used to be a little gas stove that these irons, there was these 3 of them sitting on that thing, and then you iron with one, and then after it cooled down, you moved it back to the stove, and then used the next one, and so on. My oldest sister Ruby, unfortunately, was the one that had to do most of the ironing of the shirts, touching them up. This is a ticket used, and for those that are old enough might have heard the old saying, "No Tikki, no laundry." And that's how they used to kind of tease us Chinese. Well, it's really true. If you didn't have a ticket, you didn't get your laundry, because how else would the proprietor identify your clothes? There's 2 parts to this ticket, and this is the one that my dad had, tailoring laundry. And one ticket, the bigger ticket, was given to the customer, and the other ticket went to their clothes, and that's how they kept track of it. Oh, good. The laundry was dried here's the cycle we went through. On Sunday, my dad used to sit there all day with my mom sorting the clothes out. We used to get all the clothes coming in from the customers generally on Saturday. And then on Sunday, there's a big stack. Well, he spent all day sorting the clothes out. And how do you keep track of all this stuff? He had these little tabs that he'd write in Chinese on a little Chinese brush, hit the tab onto the shirts or whatever it was, and then put it in a pile. And I'm talking about the piles because as kids, we didn't know any better, but yes, these piles were our playthings. We'd come diving in there and crawl underneath and everything. Of course, this is all dirty clothes, but anyway, I think that helped us to build immunity because that's why I would say that's why I've lived so long. But one other job that I had, because all the 3 older brothers were in the service, was I had to do folding the socks. And we had mostly farm workers that bought the clothes there. And they had these long wooden socks. And after they were washed, there was just baskets of them that I had to sit, and usually it was by Wednesday of the week, all day long, just folding those socks. And the way I did it, you'd stick your hand in this thing, grab the heel, then pull that out. And that was, unfortunately, because we had so many farmers, they had these long wooden socks. And sometimes they would just be still covered or filled with rice hulls. And then I had to shake it all out and and then so it was not the most pleasant job. And whenever I finished that week, that was the best thing that I could do. I don't think, John, did you ever have that job? Okay. I don't think Hank did.
Speaking of that.
Okay, here's a picture of who you might that be. That's my youngest brother. You can see this, probably around 4 years old? About 4 or 5 years old. We were playing down the street in the backyard, and there was a kind of whatever it was, he fell off and he broke his leg. Well, we didn't know any better. We brought him home, and then my mom used what we call this Chinese medicine. It was like an alcohol rub. And, all she could do is just rub that leg, because he didn't know it was broken. And he would just be yelling his head off. And there's 2 or 3 of us boys, well, John and I, and maybe my sister, we were just trying to pull my brother away because we could see him really yelling his head off, that was hurting. Well, finally they just determined they better take him to a doctor, which they did, and found out he broke his leg, actually broke it. So after seeing the doctor, look how big he is, not big enough for crutches. So my sister Lucy says, okay, we have a pair of old tennis rackets. Look at it, and she put little braces across, patted the ends, and he used those as crutches. So, I'm sorry she's not here for us to, but her daughters are here, right? Were you right, Ricky? Have you ever heard the story about him? Okay, but that's my brother Hank. Raise your hand, Hank. Yeah, he's not very smart either. Okay. What?
So, Grant, you came across a framed version of this picture decades later. You want to come up and tell that story really briefly because it's really fascinating.
Hi, I'm Cousin Grant. I was at a friend's office in the Asian Law Caucus in the late 1970s, and his name is Wally. He's from Chico. And I'm sitting in his office, and I turn around, heading out the door, and I go, that picture's of my Uncle Hank. It's on his wall. I go, where'd you get that picture? And Wally said, oh, I got it at a garage sale in Chico. Whoa. So somehow it had gotten around, moved up the valley a little bit, and Wally, I said, why'd you get it? He goes, see, I just like the picture. And then Uncle Jack told me that it got on, was printed in the Woodland Democrat and then got posted on the wire services, right? Yeah, and Uncle Jack will tell you what happened next.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Anyway, we had this judge, a municipal court judge that used to walk by the building all the time, and he saw my brother Hank standing in the front of the laundry there with it like that. So he says, oh, wait, and he went back. And he was an amateur photographer, came back and took that picture, and then unbeknownst to us, he submitted it to the Woodland Democrat, and several weeks later, of all things, we started getting letters in saying, how is your boy? Is he still, is his legs okay and all that? And sometimes they would be even $1 bill in this. And this was really something because this is in the 30s and money was really tight. But anyway, so we said, hey, maybe you can break the other leg and we'll send that picture out and see what else we can get. But anyway, that's the story. But the thing is, if you look, you can see this building was really in bad shape and decrepit. And here's another one. This is my sister Lucy. This shows a better picture of part of the front. And you can see there's a bay window. But this building was built in 1853. We were there in the 1920s. There had never been any repair work, never been painted or anything like that. But it was a very substantial wooden building there. The only problem was that every winter time, when the first rains came, the rain would just come pouring through holes in the roof. So that was just traditional. My dad would go up on the roof with a can of tar and try to find wherever the water drained through. So, but that was part of our lives, and we didn't think much about it. As far as the interior, there was nothing like the wiring or anything like that. We had a few light bulbs that were hanging on open cords, and that was the way we got light. We didn't have any running water except in one faucet in what was the kitchen, and there was no hot water. So we always had to boil water to take a bath or something like that. Well, I don't know how my dad determined, but when we had a big boiler that made steam for presses, somehow he hooked up a rubber hose and brought it inside, and then we could turn it on and steam would come out, and we'd stick that in the water, and that would heat the water, and that's how we had hot water out there. We really thought that was quite some invention in those days. So I just, what's that?
George.
Oh, okay. My brother. See, I can't lie to you completely because I got somebody checking me out. He says it was Brother George that did that pipe. I thought it was my father. Here's another thing. My father and mother really didn't learn English because once they came over here, they all had to work. And so I don't know how we got trained or anything like that. but we were, and we turned out okay. So I guess whatever they did right. The family, the picture's gone now, but there were 6 in that family picture. Actually, there were 2 more, John and Hank, after that. But it worked out well. My sister Ruby, the oldest, came first, and then there's 3 boys after that. So she, being the older one, had to take care of those boys. And then after the second sister, Lucy, was born, and she got old enough, then we had 3 more boys, myself, John, and Hank, and so that was her job to take care of the kids. So everybody had a job. That's all I'm trying to tell you. And I want to show you why the picture's still here. You can see 3 windows. The 3rd window was my parents' bedroom. I was born in that bedroom. John was born in that bedroom. Hank, because he was a bad one, had to go to hospital to get home. But the laundry, we spent the 20 years not only as a business, but we actually lived in the building. Some incidents I'll tell you about this. Like I say, even though it's a sturdy building, it was warm. And I remember one time we had this customer, a woman, and she was a little hefty, you might say. Well, she came in once to get her laundry, and next thing we knew, she fell to the floor with one leg. And you should have seen the kids that were there. We just all scattered like rats, you know. And I just remember in the mixed room looking up, picking up the curtain to see what happened to her, and my dad was trying to help her out and all that stuff. And of all things, she was apologizing to beat the band, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I broke your floor. You got it fixed, and you know she'll be glad to pay for it." Oh. Nowadays, we'd be sued to yeah. But anyway, that was one just that. Another thing was that I always remember being the 4th boy, that 2 of us, the 2 older ones, and then my brother Jimmy and I, we slept in this one bed, this big bed, and it was just a hard wooden bed with some but because it's 4 of us, 2 had to be sit on one end, and the other 2 had to sit on the other. So we had our feet sticking in each other. And I'll tell you, you think that we didn't have fights. We all said, "Get your stinky feet away," you know. So, but my 2 sisters, big girls, they had their own bed in another part of the bedroom. So that's all part of our life. We are always pleased when a couple of the older boys would get to move to this little separate bedroom, and then the rest of us spread out in the bed. So that's part of the thing that we had on this. As I started to tell you that every winter, when the first rains came, my dad would have to go up on the roof with the bucket of tar and find where he can see where the hose were and spread the rest out. But you know, as kids, this was during the Depression, and we didn't think anything of it, and we were in a rental building. I remember having to take the rent money once a month over to Musgrove and Wright Villeting Company on Main Street. And, you know, it's just all part of life. But like I say, I think we all came out okay, because 3 boys were on the service. They did well there. One was a tech sergeant. My oldest brother was a tech sergeant. The one that was in the Navy was a petty officer, I think, a first-class petty officer. He was a radio man. And then the 3rd brother was sent to Yale University to study Chinese in preparation for our invasion of China and the war with Japan. And then the 3 of us, like I say, I ended up in the Army. My brother was the post surgeon, and then Brother Hank was the Navy. I'm 91 years old. I'm lucky I can even remember my name. So, but anyway, that's the story of our lives. And like I say, that book on the laundry. Why the Chinese gravitated to laundries was that because we had so much prejudice and what's called that they took us out of the mine. Then they came in. Fortunately, the railroads came and they used a lot of them there. But then after that, they had to compete on other business. Well, no, there wasn't anybody that really wanted to run a laundry, but the Chinese took that job over. And a lot of them were hand laundries. They would send out the clothes to be washed by a big commercial laundry. The wet clothes would come back, and they would do all the laundry. And so that's why they call them hand laundries. What?
So, out of those humble beginnings, my dad and his siblings, all his brothers, ended up attending UC Berkeley and graduating. And Uncle John was an OBGYN. Uncle Hank was a physician. My dad, I meant pharmacist, sorry. And Dad was, ended up a colonel in the Army, plus also he was one of the chiefs of the Public Employees Retirement System. And Grant's father was an architect. And then Frank was an accountant, correct? No. Jim was the accountant, and Frank was a research analyst. So they all did really well for themselves.
What year did the laundry close?
Three brothers all came back from the service, and they had the GI Bill, so they were all what's called. I just graduated from high school. My counselor, unbeknownst to me, submitted my name for a scholarship there, and told me at the end of my senior year, said, "Oh, Jackie, we got good news for you. We got you a scholarship at University of California." And I didn't know what the University of California was, even a little town. Anyway, we ended up all four of us started Cal. No, two of them went to Sac City first, and then my brother and I, Frank, we were at Cal, and then later on, all four of us were at Cal at the same time, and we all graduated in 51. Then John and Hank, they came later, but they also graduated from Cal. John from the medical school in San Francisco, and Hank at the
Pharmacy.
pharmacy.
And the only reason why the sisters Lucy and Ruby were not able to attend college was because at that time it was uncommon for females, even though they also graduated at the top of their class, because the graduation.
Graduated as servant, valedictorian, grammar school, and then Lucy and Jim. Lucy, my oldest sister Ruby, graduated as a valedictorian from her Dingle Grammar School, and my brother Jimmy and Lucy graduated also from the grammar school. Same time, I remember this so well because at graduation time, the president of the education board, David Adams, came to the laundry and told my dad, you tell your son Jimmy to go to, I think it was J.C. Penney at the time, get himself a suit, and Lucy, same thing, go get her a dress. So that was really something that we had the president of the school board, financing their clothes. But Lucy went on. She was a salutatorian, and Jimmy was valedictorian in grammar school. But Lucy went on to become the valedictorian of high school. Jimmy was already in the service, but they rated him number one. So, in a sense, even just based on his 3 years of school there, so they did well in school. I always remember when I started high school that for English class, the teacher would say, Jackie says, how are you going to be? Are you going to be like your sister Ruby or your brother George? So I knew that George probably was always fooling around.
Anyway, we'd so like to thank you all for being here, listening to the family history at Dead Cat Alley, and I think Dino's rest of your tour or schedule.
Yeah, Katie has schedules if you want
Can I
to.
ask a quick question, just a real quick question? When that was torn down, how long before that was built? Was it vacant or was it built right away?
I think it was several years. I'm not sure the date when that was built.
And where did your family move to after that? Here in town still? Oh, Sacramento.
Yeah, my dad quit the laundry in 1947 because, like I say, the three older brothers all came back from the service. They all had the GI Bill of Rights to go to school, and I ended up having a scholarship that same year. So 4 oldest boys all were in college, and that just left my 2 sisters. So besides that, my dad had never been back to China in 31 years, and his parents were still living in China. And I have to tell you, let me show you one more picture. You have that picture? I wanted to show you this picture. This is a picture of my grandfather's place in the village area of China. So what my dad would be doing all these years would be whatever extra money he could have, he'd send back to China, and his father would continue to buy little property, and so they became pretty wealthy. The grandfather actually was the head of the school in that little village, and somehow he had this building built, which really surprised me. I went back with my dad in 1947, expecting to be in a little small hut or something like that, and then there was this building. It's 4 floors because there's 3 brothers and then the parents. So that's why they had a 4-story brick building. So, thank you. Thanks again.